the complaint that the president and the Gabbai about how long chakras is going on. So we're starting Daf Yomi 20 to 9. Starting 25 after 8.
You know, yesterday we started earlier. Depends. Okay. All right. Well, okay. Today is stuff is supposed to. Today is the 27th of April.
So at 11:30, you have
Okay.
Pretty much second volume, but put it up to there this morning.
Yeah.
Stuff in now.
All right. You checked them all?
What?
You checked all of them, right?
I'm taking that home now.
Okay. All right. Learning sponsors, Isaac and Evelyn Blachor. Is Bob? Okay. Bob, Isaac Blachor came to me yesterday. He's got yard site next week. He didn't know which gabbai to go to make sure that on Shabbos he would have an aliyah. What? That's what I told him. Okay. Isaac and Evelyn Blachor in memory of his sister Chaya Rachel Bas Isser, friends of Leoni Meisman and Leah Sabra Bas Chanach Zundel, friends of Melaskotsky, Moshe Zelig Ben Mordechai, Martin Lipman and family in memory of his wife Malka Chana Bas Pinchas, friends of Herb Jeremiah Tzvi Ben Zev, friends of Sam Coleman, Shmuel Ben Yaakov, friends of Gideon Lazinski, Mordechai Shlomo Ben Meir. A month of learning by friends and students of Rabbi Shalom Kornblum, Rav Shalom Ben Mordechai. Aaron and Mel Haller in memory of her father, Yosef Eliezer Ben Tzvi Hirsch. Mark Scher in memory of his father, Mordechai Ben Menachem Manus. Mark Linder in memory of his nephew, Eretz Paul Ben Sirlis. Susan and Ron Podolsky in memory of her father, Simcha Bunam Ben Yeshua. Is Sid here this morning?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Michael and Judith Poretsky in memory of his mother, Rachel Bas Avram. Susan and Ron Podolsky in memory of her mother, Chaya Bas Avram Dov. B. Pizer in memory of her father, Yitzchak Dov Ben Shmuel. A week of learning by Judy Iger in memory of her husband, Aaron Ben Shlomo Michael. Again, Judy Iger in memory of her son, Anshel Yitzchak Ben Aharon. Jack Gilman in memory of his brother, Zev Yosef Ben Yitzchak. Sharon Glass in memory of her mother, Chaya Bas Avram Baruch. And today being the 27th of April, Arthur Ritholtz has a day of learning in memory of his wife, Duba Chaya Bas Rabbi Yosef. And the Neshamas have an aliyah, crank Rafir without the Yeshua Shem Atzliah, and the Chol B'nai Israel a good Gaben Shia.
I would like to protest. Judy Iger got the word again,
Okay.
but Podolsky did not.
Oh, that's because, I see. You're going to protest that?
Yes.
Okay, that's because you weren't here the last time I did that. Okay?
I'm moving to get it again.
See, you weren't here on Shabbos when I gave that. Okay? I once said to Sid, Sid is coming in?
Should be. He was here.
Okay.
Because he was there for David.
Yeah, no, I know that. I saw that.
He mentioned he was.
Oh, yeah?
He's not coming.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
All right, so let's
All right.
get going.
Okay, so I want to when we finished on the bottom of Kaf Chet Amud Beis and went over to the top of Kaf Tet Amud Aleph. Okay, that's where we were finishing yesterday. Are we saying that the prohibition for her to marry into the Kuna doesn't need a pause? Right, Sharia treating something where there was a doubt as if it was valid. Okay, we're saying that in that case we see that they treat the suspicion of a woman behaving as a zona vis-a-vis kahuna, okay, as a actual zona. Trumanami lo tebaikra. Okay, truma also maybe we don't need a pasuk to indicate, because we saw that Rabbi Akiva darshaned the pasuk with three things. Okay. All right, and one of the words was for kahuna, for truma, I'm sorry, aside from kahuna. Okay. Shaharei asaba safek zona kizona. Why? And that's where we stopped yesterday. Okay. Why? Because we're saying that they established the fact that a woman who was questionably a zona, or her behavior, okay, would still be considered like a vadai zona.
For certain din.
Right? Okay. So what happens? Elul Rabbi Akiva. So that's where we're picking up now. You don't have a sefer? Okay. Is somebody check? Okay. So I'll tell you what we can do. Okay. I'll tell you what. Hold on a second. Let me just see which volume you've got. All right. Hold on a second. All right. I'm going to switch books with you. Same book, just a different name. Thank you very much. Okay. All right. That's it. All right.
Why couldn't you take the shoe one?
We got it taken care of. Right, where did I say I am? Right there.
Cup test.
Okay. There you go. You got a book there. That's what I need. All right. All right. So what happens? All right. Why is it that Rabbi Akiva darshans these words one way, and Rabbi didn't darshan it that way? What?
Is he Darshan's Bavin?
Exactly. It's going to be the same argument that we saw previously. Okay, that where he sees one of the words has ve nitma'a, he's going to darshan the vav. But let's go into the Gemara now and see how the Gemara explains it. Okay, so what happens? Ela Rabbi Akiva, arba'a kra'ai kativen. There are four different, let's call it statements, or four different citations in the verses, right? Chad leba'al, one applies to the husband, one isur. V'chad lebo'el, one isur applies to the paramour. A third time that the pasuk is said, v'chad lekahuna,
And then the Bav.
right? And then what does he do? V'chad letruma, and one he applies also to truma. Rabbi Ishmael, and Rabbi Ishmael who challenged Rabbi Akiva. How is that? Why is that the case? Tlata krai b'ktive. He only saw or felt that there were three statements of the word, right? And therefore he doesn't darshan vavim. Chad leba'al, one to the husband. V'chad lebo'el, one to the paramour. V'chad letruma, and one applying towards the prohibition of truma. V'kuhuna, acha b'kal v'chomer, and instead he learns the prohibition of her marrying into kahuna through a kal v'chomer, which we saw previously. Okay, Rabbi Ishmael, in regards to Rabbi Ishmael, continues the Gemara. Mamai de'itztarich kra letruma. On what basis is it that he requires, okay, a drasha to show the prohibition? Okay, drasha from the pasuk. All right, that prohibition for truma. Ukuhuna acha b'kal v'chomer. Whereas I'm going to say the prohibition for marrying into the kahuna, he bases it on not a pasuk word in the pasuk, but a rabbinic exposition, a drasha, okay, of kal v'chomer. Dilma ki itztarich lekahuna utruma shaya. Maybe we might say that he needs that really for the prohibition of the kahuna, okay, but as far as her eating truma,
She should be able.
why not? Why shouldn't it be permissible to her? Amar lach, okay, says the Gemara. He might tell you, Rabbi Ishmael, right? Mistabra domia de ba'al uboel. Why? Because it seems logical that it's similar to the prohibitions of the husband and the paramour, namely, ma ba'al uboel michayim, the same way that the husband and the paramour are prohibited during their entire lifetimes. Okay, af truma, hi nami mechayim. So likewise, she is totally forbidden throughout the lifetime to eat truma. Okay, so that's the point. La afuke kahuna, with the exclusion of the kahuna, de la achar mita, okay, where that is after mates, after the person dies. Okay, now I'll just point out quickly Art Scroll 29A2, note number 9, gives a more fuller explanation. If you want to circle that to go back and look at it. Okay. I liked how Art Scroll worded it in particular in that case. Okay. But I'm just pointing it out. All right. The lachar mita. Okay. Okay. The Rebbe Akiva. Whereas Rebbe Akiva, what's the situation with him? Okay. He would argue the following. Dumia de Baal, it's uboel, litlai, that a comparison to the husband or the paramour, that isn't the case, right? V'inami itle, and were he to hold that there were such a comparison, right? Milta da'acha b'kal v'chomer. Okay, that would be something that could come based on the kal v'chomer. Tarach v'katav la kra, that even though it's possible to learn it through rabbinic exposition of a drasha, nevertheless, there are certain times when the Torah itself spells it out in the text. Okay? All right, let's go on now. Amar Rav Gidl, says Rav Gidl Amar Rav in the name of Rav. Davar sheyesh bo dat l'sha'el. We come back to this question, okay, this example, he's saying, we said that there were those two criteria, okay, to make something safek vadai. One was the question of Rishus, right? One was the question of domain, Rishus Rabim, Rishus Yachid. The other was the question of having an object, and I'm saying object in particular, and that object could be a person, but we might say an object could become tameh as well, and being able to ask about
an
it.
object versus a person.
Yeah, okay, that's the point. So what happens? Amar Rav Gidl Amar Rav, davar sheyesh bo dat l'sha'el. When we're talking about something or someone, okay, that it's possible to question, ve'ein bo dat l'sha'el. But we're also talking about a situation, an object, okay, that is not possible to be questioned. Mehai kra nafka. From this verse, we derive this distinction. Why? Because the pasuk says, "V'habasar asher yiga b'chol tomei lo ye'achel," because the meat which comes in contact with anything that is impure, tamei, cannot be eaten. Right? So what happens here? Basically, you're not going to ask a piece of meat, a question. All right? Right? So what happens?
Are you kosher?
Right? Vadai tamehu, which implies certainly, okay.
Even though it's a suffix.
Right, even though, right? Here, certainly we're going to say that that piece of meat now is tameh. Okay? So, the lo yechem. Why? Because the pasuk spells out she can't be eaten. Hasafek tameh, v'safek tahor, which would seem to imply here, if it's a doubt of whether it's tameh or a doubt if it's tahor, ye'achel, it should be able to be eaten. Ema seifa. But elsewhere, I'll say, okay, following later on, we have a pasuk that says,
it's just there's next clause
next, yeah,
of
next
the same pasuk.
Vahabasar kol tahor ye'achel basar. But regarding the meat, if it is tahor, it may be eaten as meat, right? Vadai tahor hudi yochal basar. If it's clearly or certainly tahor, right? It can be eaten as meat. So which would imply hasafek tameh v'safek tahor, which would imply if it's questionably tameh, and if it's questionably tahor, it would imply lo ye'achel. It should not be eaten. So we have a contradiction.
In the same.
Okay? So what do? Elalav shmamina. Rather, isn't it that we learn from this the following? Kan sheyesh bo da'at l'sha'el. Here, there are times when we have an opportunity to be able to ask and gain an answer. Kan she'ein bo da'at l'sha'el. And here, there are examples where we don't have the knowledge, the ability to ask, right? V'itztarich, the Rav Gidl Amara, and we need, therefore, this statement by Rav Gidl in the name of Rav. V'itztarich lemigmar misota. But we also need to learn it from our example of sota. Why do we need both? The Gemara goes on to tell us. De'imi de Rav, had we only learned it from the example of Rav Gidl, okay, in the name of Rav, Hava Amina, I would have thought to say, Bein Birishut Yachid, Bein Birishut Rabin. That's regardless of whether it's in private domain or public domain. Itztarich lemigmar misota. Therefore, it was necessary also to learn it from the example of Sota, where her act, remember, was done in private, and so therefore we make a distinction between private and public. Ve'imi Sota, and had I only learned it with the example of the situation from Sota, right? Hava Amina Ada Ikadas Nogea Umagia. I may have thought to think that therefore I needed the opinions of both. Okay, the person who was acting and the one who was acted upon. Okay, or in this case, the piece of meat that came in contact. Okay, and
that's supposed to be a pun.
Of course. Okay, and the other. Okay, tzricha, and therefore I need both. Okay, let's go on now. Now we come back. Okay, when we said bo bayom, remember we mentioned that implied the day when there was a change of leadership.
Discussion started.
Okay, the leadership in the Beis Midrash, more students were involved. Okay, and a number of halachas were discussed. And we said Eduyot was the result of that discussion. Okay, so what happens? Let's go on now. Right? So we're going to get into a topic here as we continue from here and into the next Amud, where we're going to deal with, I want to say, just a quick, levels of Tuma. Okay? We all should be briefly familiar. Art School has an extensive note. Okay? If you're not familiar with the levels of Tuma, probably worth looking over the note. Okay? In essence, we talk about an Av Tuma and then okay? What?
Aviyavos.
Yeah.
Dead body.
Top level, okay, would be Tumas Mace, Aviyavos, right? But we have different levels. Okay, we got Rishon, Sheni, Shlishi, okay, maybe even Revi'i, okay? And then we have the fact that at the same time, certain things can't transmit Tuma to other items, question of foodstuffs, question of objects, things like that, okay? So as I say, Art School.
Then you should add the word, but often, rather than calling something a shame.
Okay, all right.
They call it a psul because it can become.
I was going to get to that. I was going to get to that later. Okay, but Michael's point is correct. All right. If we say that things can transfer the tumor, okay, as we're going to see the discussion momentarily, from a second to a third, or a third from a fourth. There's also a situation where the item, okay, if it's, okay, whereas a foodstuff can transfer, for example, there's certain things where it doesn't transfer to make an item a new level of tuma, but it does render the use of that item no longer viable. Okay, I'll phrase it that way for the moment. Okay, so what happens? Umeyachar de'ein lo lama tameh. Okay, we're talking about truma now as shlishi. Okay, truma, if we said, okay, that truma could become, okay, third level, okay, tameh. Amar Rav Yehuda. Says Rav Yehuda, Amar Rav in the name of Rav. Min haTorah ein lo. Okay, from the Torah, that's not the case. Midin,
It's never
There's
mentioned.
no place.
A
right?
shlishi
It's
is
not,
never
it's not
mentioned.
discussed. Okay, I'll put it that way. Midin kal v'chomer, but through rabbinic exposition. Okay, yeshlo. It then does have, can have the status of truma being shlishi. Okay. Uma tvu yom. What's the, couldn't we give an example? Okay, can we give an example? So the Gemara wants to proceed and tell us what is this kind of rabbinic exposition? What is the Kal V'chomer? That's possible. Okay, now again, remember a Tvu Yom is a person who is immersed in the morning. Okay, but they are not actually totally tahor till nightfall. Okay? So
Not
they're,
even the next day, the court.
well, that's true, but I'm saying
That's gonna be the review.
it's gonna, we'll get to that, but I don't want to rush ahead. Okay, but my point is, in that window between the time that they've immersed in the morning and nightfall, there is still some taint of tuma with the person. Okay, what happens then if that person who immersed that day had contact with certain things? Okay, all right, so that's what I wanted.
Can't eat certain things.
Okay.
Contact's not an issue.
Umatvu yom shemutar bechulin. And whereas a person who is immersed that day is permitted with non-sacred items, okay? But posel bitruma, but he renders truma, which ordinarily is geared for kohanim, okay, and a higher level of food sanctity than chulin. Okay, he renders that unusable. Let's put it that way. Kikar sheni, a loaf. Okay, it can be second level tuma. Took me about 3 times to go through this Gemara here with the language. Shepasul bechulin, but that is going to render chulin invalid if it came in contact with it. Okay,
No.
the kikar sheni, if it comes in contact with chulin, it's going to render it pasul. Shepasul bechulin.
Kikar sheni shepasul b'chulin.
Yes, if the kikar is,
a level 2 loaf of bread,
yes,
if it is chulin, is pasul. It
That's
cannot
prior to
pass
this
on.
ago.
That loaf of bread cannot create a shlishi.
it doesn't continue it.
Correct. So the way you have to read it, kikar sheni, a loaf of
Bread,
that
which is
has a
second
level 2
second level
tumor.
tuma.
Shepasel b'chulin is pasul if it's chulin.
Shepasul bechulin.
It's pasul if it's chulin. There's no, the way you read it, it
I
can
understand.
add a level and it cannot.
Well, see, ain't no din. Is it not logical? Says the Gemara. Shiaseh shlishi betruma. Okay, that it should then render third truma. Ikala mifrach. It's possible to challenge that. Okay, ma litvu yom. whereas the Tvuyom, Shekain Av Hatuma, that his status,
when he started.
okay, his status is like a top level of Tuma,
Before he
Okay.
goes to the next.
of course, okay, Titi. There too we can say, right? What happens? We derive from that as follows. Mitvul Yom the Sharetz. We could derive that from the example of the Sharetz, right?
Again,
Mitvul
If he-
Yom the
if he-
Sharetz. Okay. Malitvul Yom the
no,
Sharetz,
if
where the
he's in
Tfuyu
contact-
becomes defiled.
if he
by a
becomes-
sharet.
If he becomes, when you did this Kal V'chomer, you made the assumption that he was in contact with a dead body or a sword.
Well, we're gonna,
And
but now
became
we're
an
gonna
Av.
change that.
But now he's
We're gonna
in
change,
contact
that's
with
what
the
we're gonna get to.
Sharets. Right.
That's what we're gonna get to. Okay? All right. So the Gemara took this position where it said, right, we saw, I just want to, that's where I wanted to get to it. Okay? Kavod yesh lo matful yom shemutar b'chol b'so b'truma. P'shapusim. Eno din sheseh shlishi b'truma. Ikela mifrach. I could challenge this. Malatfu yom shekain av hatuma. And that's really a question. Are you going to say that this av, that this Tvuyom is really had become, his Tameh status was due because he was contact and therefore with an av Tuma? No, I'm going to suggest something else. Derive it or adjust it from the fact Mitvuyom Desheretz, that his status of Tameh came about because he was defiled by a sheretz.
Which is an
Not, okay, which is not an av Tuma.
Sheretz is an Av,
Sheretz is an Av.
and therefore
The Sheretz
he
makes
is
him
a
a Rishon.
Rishon.
He's only a Rishon. That's what,
Because the Sheretz
he's not
is
an Av.
If he touches a dead body,
He's an Av, just
If
like
he
the
touches-
body.
right.
If he
no,
touch,
the body is an Abiyavos. The only thing that stays on the same level is if it's metal. But if a human being touches a mace, the mace is an Abiyavos.
he becomes an Av.
But if a human being holds a sheretz, the sheretz is
It's
an
an
Av,
Av, and
so
he
the
becomes
human
a
being
Rishon.
is a Rishon.
So that's the point the Gemara is saying.
Right. So
Maybe
you
he
can't-
should, maybe the problem is that his Tuma of the Tvuyom is not based on
it
being an Av,
he's an
but it's
Av,
based
a
simply
Rishon.
on a sheretz. And therefore, Malit Tvuyom, the sheretz, shekain b'mino av hatuma. Okay, so what about the status of the Tvuyom, of the sheretz? Can we say that that's the same as the av tuma? Kli cheres yochiach. Okay, that the implement made of earthenware, that will be my proof. Namely, malikli cheres shekain mitamei aviro. Okay, that is an example where the earthenware vessel can result in something inside it becoming tamei, okay, because of the airspace of
It
the,
becomes the next
the
level.
inside.
and
okay, Tvul Yom yochiach. So Tvul Yom would give us proof. The Choser Hadin, in other words, it goes round and round. Lo re'izeh ki re'izeh. This characteristic or attribute is not like this. The lo re'izeh ki re'izeh. And this characteristic or attribute is not like that. Hatzad hashaveh shebahim shemutarin bechulin uposlin betruma. The common characteristic they have, okay, okay, of the items, okay, is that they are permitted regarding chulin, but they render invalid truma. Kol shekain, how much more so? Kikar sheni, a loaf, that second level tome, sheposel bechulin, that becomes puzzle regarding chulin, the posel betruma, that it's also going to
it can
render
transfer to
truma.
truma.
Okay, so what happens? So the Gemara now tells us, based on what we saw previously in the Mishnah, Vidor Acher, and here we have to read Acher is not as future, a future generation. Parich, okay, would challenge that. Ma lahatzad hashavesh bahen. What is the common factor between them? Shekain yesh bahen tzad chamor, that they both have a stringency associated with them. V'Rabban Yochanan ben Zakkai tzad chamor lo parich. And Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, when he made his statement, okay,
He doesn't think that.
he
is-
does not challenge that, see that as a opportunity for challenge.
but everybody
So
else-
what happens? Tanya, okay, and we learn the following. Amar Rav Yossi, says Rav Yossi, Minayin lerevi'i b'kodesh. Okay, shepaso. How do we know then, okay, that in this case, that kodesh, foodstuffs that are of a high sanctified level, are rendered invalid. V'dinhu, and this seems logical. Ma mechusar kippurim shemutar betruma, whereas an individual who hasn't completed their purification process, I'll phrase it that way, is permitted with truma.
By nightfall.
What?
By night.
Yeah, okay. Pasul b'kodesh renders nevertheless,
You can't
Kodesh,
eat
right?
Kodesh
Can't,
until
right?
you
Can't
get
have
there.
that.
It brings the
Shlishi, okay, right? Shepasul b'truma, enodin hu shi'aseh revi'i b'kodesh. Okay, something that is third level tuma, okay, and renders, right, truma invalid. Isn't it logical then that it's going to make and to a fourth level, okay, of tameh and in invalid kodesh?
Truma,
V'ilam,
which is a third level.
right, that's the case. Hold on. V'lamadnu, but we've learned shlishi lekodesh min haTorah. Okay, that we've learned that it is third, kodesh becomes third level from the Torah. Revi'i mikal v'chomer, and it can only become fourth level tameh or tuma based on rabbinic exposition. So the Gemara now asks the question: you've just said that kodesh can only become shlishi, okay, from the Torah.
That the Torah mentions
What's that?
Kodesh.
Okay. How is it possible? What's the basis for that? Shlishi lekodesh min haTorah minalam. On what basis it? Okay. Dichtiv, because it's written as follows: V'habasar asher yiga b'chol tameh.
Oh,
Yeah, b'chol tameh lo ye'achel. Okay, that meat which has become in contact with anything that is tameh,
even a shame.
okay, regardless, whatever, okay, is not able to be eaten. Milo askinen denaga b'shem. Are we not talking about here that it may have contact with something that is second level tumor? Va'amar rachmana lo ye'achel. And here the Torah clearly says it cannot be eaten, which would imply then that that meat is a shlishi. Okay, so from that we would get derived from that pasuk that kodesh, all right, is a level shlishi tuma, capable of being level shlishi tuma. Okay, so therefore revi'i mikal v'chomer k'da amran. It therefore must be that to argue that it's kodesh can be fourth level tuma, okay, can only be based on rabbinic exposition of a kal v'chomer, as we have said. Okay, now what happens? Amar Rabbi Yochanan, says Rabbi Yochanan as follows. Okay, tam beribi. Okay. The reasoning of Beribi, okay, Beribi here is a honorific title, the honored one, the great one, he's referring to Rabbi Yossi in this case. Okay. Eini yodea mahu. I don't know what it is. Shaharei tshuvato b'tzido. Why? Because he had his own reasoning, his own answer. Okay. Ochel haba michamat tvul yom yochiach. Okay, foodstuffs. Okay, that a result of the contact, if we want to use that word. Okay, with a tvul yom, will give proof. Shepasul betruma, that it renders right. Truma pasul.
Which makes it a
Makes
three.
it shlishi.
Right? That's right. Ve'eno oser revi'i b'kodesh. But it does not make kodesh a fourth level tune. Okay? The Tanya. Okay, as we learn as follows in a Braita. Abba Shaul Omer, he says as follows. Tvul yom tchila the kodesh. That according to him, the Tvul yom is a rishon. Okay? Regarding kodesh. The tamei shnayim, and that can render then
2 levels.
okay 2 levels. The psul echad, and it renders another item simply unfit. Okay, the fourth. So second and third become tamei.
No, first and second become Tomei.
Second and third
is
become tamei.
psul.
Fourth becomes unfit. Okay.
Not here.
Okay. I copied it right from ours. Rabbi Meir Omer says as follows. All right. Mitame echad uposel echad. No, Rabbi Meir disagrees. And he says it only renders 1 level tame and 1 level pasul, as opposed to 2 levels tame and 1 level pasul. Okay. The Chachamim Omrim, but the sages say, Kashem shaposel ochlei truma, the same way it invalidates, okay, foodstuffs of a truma level, umashke truma, and liquids of a truma level, kach posel ochlei kodesh umashke kodesh. So likewise, it invalidates foodstuffs of a kodesh level and liquids of a kodesh level. Okay. Now, Rav Papa is going to challenge. Mat kifla Rav Papa. Mimai the Rabbi Yossi karabanan svirele. On what basis might you even think that Rabbi Yossi holds like the sages? Okay. Dilma ka'Abba Shaul svirele. Perhaps he holds more like the view of Abba Shaul. The Amar, who says, L'tamei shnayim v'lifsol echad, that it renders 2 levels of tuma and 1 level of pisul, of unfitness. If you're going to say and think that Rabbi Yossi holds similar to Abba Shaul in this case, Laite the Revi'i B'Kodesh, let him teach it, okay, that 4th level of Kodesh, Me'ochel Shabami Chamat Tvuyom, that is based on the fact that it comes from foodstuffs that from the
Started out with a
Tvuyom. Uma Ochel Habami Chamat Tvuyom, and whereas foodstuffs that come from initially the Tvul Yom, who we said was a Rishon, okay, right? Gufe mutar b'chulin, ought to be then that itself should be permitted in regards to chul. Amart, and therefore you say, Osera v'iba kodesh, that it's going to make 4th level kodesh a 4th level. Okay, ochel, I go over just a tiny bit. Shlishi. It comes then, the food becomes on a 3rd level. Haba michamat sheni. It comes from what it was a second, right? Second. The sheni gufe asur bechulin. That second itself is forbidden regarding chulin.
This is what you have to explain here, that Chulin, there is a case where Chulin has restrictions. If it's Meiser Sheni, even though it's Chulin, it can't be eaten in a state of Tuma. That's what we're talking, not just any old Chulin. You can go home and have a peanut butter
Right.
and jelly sandwich. It's taking Meiser Sheni to Yerushalayim. That is usher in, although it's still Chulin.
Okay,
That's what we're talking about here.
I will see. Okay, the Sheni Gufe Asur Bechulin, that's Shekel itself. A no din, should it not be logical then? She'oser Revi'i Kodesh, that it's going to make
And
fourth
a shlishi turns
right,
into
to Revi'i on Kodesh. Okay, and then tomorrow we'll go on.
So Rabbi Yossi doesn't do this,
He doesn't
so
say that.
therefore he can't agree.
So you can't, so the
with
question we're
Abba
going to see is, does he really agree with Abba Shaul or not? That will be pick up tomorrow. Okay.
Okay,
All right.
Makes you wonder why a young was even created.
it wasn't created.
Why have it at all? Let's say we didn't allow him to go to the